Hello, today we're featuring an exciting box from HappyModel, but just before we get into that, a quick reminder to please like or dislike this video if you don't like it. Comment down below, don't forget to subscribe, and if you can find it, click on that little bell icon. I'd almost forgotten my spiel I did, it's been so long. Anyway, HappyModel, makers of one of my favourite, and I think first what you'd call the Power Whoop, the Mobula 7, really fantastic power to weight ratio. That thing rocks and I still like to fly it. This is the Mobula 6, it's smaller. It's designed as kind of an indoor racer, and it is a tiny little quad. It is just 65mm motor to motor. There's two modes of it actually. There's the 25,000 kV, which they call the race edition, and the 19,000 kV, which is the standard edition. This, I thought I was actually getting the 25,000, but this is the 19,000. This is probably a better bet actually, because where I'd normally fly this is around my house, which doesn't cope very well with things going very high speed. If you're in sort of a sort of indoor racing event, that's when your 25,000 kV motors would come in handy. Of course, you can alter the throttle rate within Betaflight, so even if you do get the high kV motor, you can dull it down so it'll be okay inside. But let's see what's in the box. See what we're dealing with here. Well, the first thing to notice is we get 4 lipos. These are HappyModel 300 mAh high voltage batteries. Labelled as 30/60C. Nice to get a good decent amount of batteries to go with. We've got a USB battery charger, handy if you don't have your own battery charger, but I'll charge on a proper charger, it's going to be quicker. And here's the little quad in here, which is indeed absolutely tiny, and weighs next to nothing. I think this weighs 20 grams is what it was quoted as, and we've got a nice amount of cable here to hook the batteries up, USB underneath. It's got the, some would say, dreaded Crazy Bee F4 board. Lots of people kept reporting problems. I'm hoping they've sorted them. I've never had one go wrong. I seem to be in the minority here about nothing's ever blown up. Basically, it's got the whole ESC, flight controller, and receiver. This is the built-in SPI receiver. They also do a FlySky version as well. Tiny little 0802 motors. And we've got GemFan 1219 props, which are just, everything is so tiny. We've got a 25 milliwatts VTX, which is fixed, although I think it's smart audio compatible. Excitingly, we've got a Runcam Nano 3 camera, which is a pretty good camera. It's everything is absolutely tiny, let's face it. Also, in the box, spare set of props, little screwdriver, the prop removal tool, and some instruction sheets from HappyModel, which are nicely in colour and aren't actually too bad at all. We've got the pinouts and we've got sort of how to set it up, gubbins like that. Well, let's get it bound up, get it on a Betaflight, see what we need to do. Okay, so let's connect in and see what's happening. I've already gone in and bound it, and because this is running a quite early version of Betaflight, this is 357, you need to use the FreeSky_bind command. That was the only vague difference between this and later versions. Anyway, ports wise, we've got TBS Smart Audio. That's good because I figured it must have smart audio or something, and it does. In the configuration D-Shot 600, we haven't got motor stop, which I'll be adding. We've got props out, 8K loop. Our CPU load is high enough. I don't want it to go any higher than that. Personalisation I'll be changing. FreeSky D, as we saw before, and you can change it to FreeSky X if you really want to. Only if you can't run D8 for some reason, because it does take up more CPU. Air mode is on all the time, which I don't like. I'll be turning that off. It looks like we've got the D-Shot beeper set there. Power and battery, yep, that's set out exactly how I would have it actually, with a much lower minimum cell voltage and a higher normal, because we've got high voltage batteries. And then we've got the pit tuning, which certainly they've done things too. Because these aren't regular settings, and in the rate profile it's all a bit normal. You can see it going absolutely crazy there, and that's because if we look at the receiver, although my sticks are responding perfectly, my channel map is AETR and this is TAER, so we'll sort that out. RSSI is disabled, which is what you want to do for SPI receivers. It'll just appear anyway. The default mode, arm angle flip over after crash, turtle mode there. So I'll put a few more modes in because I might put in horizon and have an acro mode just in case we take it outside. Modes we don't need to know about. And the OSD, it's just got some minimal information down the bottom. I'll go in and mess about with that a little bit just to set it up, but there's not much to do. I'm just going to change a couple of things and then we'll take it for a fly. Okay, so here's the Maiden Flight. I'd literally just had a quick hover line of sight, and this was my first go at flying FPV just around the house, and I came out and immediately smacked it into the wall there. At least I got to test out that turtle mode worked okay. Now, this flew just fine. It does quite a lot of power there. It's really quite reactive to the sticks, so a little bit of getting used to there. But mostly I felt like I wasn't in control enough for the sort of tight space that is my house. And this is pretty much because of the camera angle. Where the camera's pointing up because it wants to go racing, it's sort of designed as a little race quad. So with its default camera angle, I felt this was a little hard to handle, and well, it didn't help me. I kept crashing. Apologies for the shaky handheld and bad lighting, but I just noticed what we've got here. Obviously the angle's up, and I was going to change that straight away, but what it's got just underneath it, if you can see there, is just this little block of foam that seems to be supporting the camera. So I'm not sure if we can move the lens down easily without removing that block, and there's that block to try and take away the vibrations. I mean, it flew well. It's very controllable, pretty smooth, but obviously for going around the house, well, my house at least, I need a little less camera angle. I imagine on a sort of race course that would be amazing, but for the house, for me, not quite so good. So let's see if we can adjust that a bit. Okay, well that last section was lit very badly, so I thought I'd better do this just so you can see what I'm getting at here. So you can see just inside there is that little bit of padding. I have moved the angle down, not all the way obviously, but to do that I needed to just unscrew the screws here just to lift that up, slide the pad out, undo the screws so I could move the camera freely, and then with these tweezers I literally just pushed that back in there. I think this is pretty important because there's a slight weirdness in this design. You'll see it's anchored here, here and here, but not here. So this front bit here actually is really kind of flop around quite a lot. So I'm guessing this was a little bit of an afterthought. They stuck that in after they found there was some vibrations there, and that's just acting as a dampener. So if you do change the angle, I would recommend you keep that in there. Anyway, let's have a fly of it now. So here's the first flight after that adjustment, which is in fact my second flight, and you can just see the curve there of the little ducts, which is kind of what I need to go for inside the house. Just seeing that means I'm in the right area. You see, it's still not perfect by any means. I'm still hitting stuff. There is certainly a bit of getting used to, and I think looking back at my footage and how I've been flying, I think it's to do with the throttle. The throttle doesn't quite respond immediately like other quads do, so there's a little bit of getting used to about this quad, but it's certainly now flying around the house a lot better, and there is a lot of pad. This is, as I said, the 1900 kV, well 19,000 kV version, which is nothing like the 25,000 kV, but there's still loads of power, and I'm using it now as a bit of an exploratory quad. Not doing particularly well, but I like the fact I can bash into stuff and it doesn't really care, it just carries on. Have to apologise, you'll see certain places the camera sort of looks like it's flickering. In certain areas of the house I've replaced halogen bulbs with LED bulbs, and the camera picks up the flicker. Like on this hallway here we've got LEDs in the upstairs hallway as well. So it certainly doesn't take long to get used to the way it flies. Just a battery or two and you'll get the hang of what it wants. And you know, despite being in stabilised mode and 1S, it seems ferocious in the amount of speed it can generate very quickly. I'm just doing sort of back and forth going along here, and it's like, wow, my house is feeling very small very quickly because I can get from one end to the other in kind of a bit of a blink of the eye. And I'm pretty happy with the way it manoeuvres as well. You can turn in very tight spaces. You won't have any issues there. It's still pretty easy because of the speed, of course, just to clonk into stuff. But I crashed this thing so many times over sort of 8 batteries I went through over a couple of days, and nothing got hurt. Not even a prop got dislodged. It just carried on going, which is pretty impressive stuff. Pop it on, the cat doesn't care what's going on. She's just happy to sleep there. Yeah, I just noticed that the throttle sort of bobbles around when I try and do something a little bit more precise. I did add a little bit of throttle expo to this a bit later because I felt it was sort of struggling on the midpoint a bit, and you see me just bashing into stuff here. But certainly flying pretty well. I'm, for some reason, super keen to try and do this, and it almost got all the way, and then it all went wrong. But again, it seems it just doesn't want to crash. It just carries on bouncing off stuff, and we get free easily. We're at 3.3 volts now, which is where I like to land. I'm sure you could run these down more, and that 3.3 lasts a while, but you can see here we're on 3 minutes 30. I did move the timer across one slot later, and it's a lot easier just to hold in hover. You can see I can hold myself quite nicely there. So yeah, just bringing this towards 4 minutes for that battery. And I didn't show you the footage when I was just line of sight hovering, so if you want to know what this looks and sounds like externally, this is just me having a little bit of fun setting up a couple of external cameras just so I could fly around and put this little segment together, which, as I said, is just a bit of fun to do really. I just like getting some external shots when I can. It always looks quite cool flying around the house. So I did do a few flights in Horizon. I found it pretty tricky, but it's got the power to go in there and do some aerobatics. I just wish I had a bit more room. I didn't touch acro because of that reason. I would have taken this outside just to have it around in the garden and do a bit more acro flying, but the rain and the wind has prevented me from doing anything this entire week other than flying indoors, so that's all I had. As far as this quad goes though, I didn't feel particularly constrained by just flying indoors on stabilise. It had plenty of speed there and plenty of oomph, and you could do a lot with it. Well, this little guy certainly was a wild ride. There was certainly a lot to like about it. It is just so tiny and light, so you got a lot of power, even on these 19,000 kV motors. I can't imagine what the 25,000 would be like indoors. Practically impossible as they fly there. But if you're in a sort of sports or racing event, that's going to come into its own, and that 25,000 kV is going to be a monster, although obviously your LiPo is not going to last as long as the little 19,000. So it wasn't the easiest thing to fly indoors, and when I think about flying indoor whoops, I always come back to this. This is the Emax Tiny Hawk. There's actually a Tiny Hawk 2 now, which is probably very good, but I haven't got one. And this was just so easy to fly. It was like the ideal indoor quad. The difference between them is size and weight. The Emax just won't have the raw power that this little one does. Very easy to fly though, absolutely. If it's your sort of first quad, I'd recommend this one any day of the week. This you can get more out of. You're going to have to work a little bit harder though, because it takes a little bit of getting used to, but that power to weight ratio is pretty amazing. You can do a lot with it. I think the quad that's closest to this one is something like the Beach FPV Meteor 65. You can see they're similar there. Similar specs. I think the camera in this one's better and it's slightly cheaper, but very, very high quality product as the Beat FPV on as well. Couldn't say too much about the camera. It was nice and small. It certainly had a reasonable picture. I find with all FPV cameras, the picture you have inside the house, even with all the lights on, as I tend to do when I'm flying indoors, never as good as when you take it outdoors into natural light. But we couldn't really do that with this. Because the weather just not playing ball. Obviously we're on an SPI receiver as well, so I wouldn't ever think this is an outdoor quad, but it's something you might want to. I love zipping from the inside to the outside around the garden and back, that sort of stuff. I think this would be great fun to do it. Certainly like the fact as well you get 4 batteries with it. My only nitpick with the batteries, they could have been slightly tighter. I think that's a little bit loose. Nothing ever came out when I crashed, but I'd sometimes find the battery sort of sticking out the front or sticking out the back a bit, where it just doesn't balance as well. But other than that, there's nothing really bad I can say about it. I just crashed into everything loads of times. I could just turtle mode it back over. No props broke. Nothing went wrong. So I can't really argue with that. Anyway, this has been the review of the HappyModel Mobula 6, kindly supplied for review by Banggood, so thanks very much to them. And of course there'll be links down below where you can check this out in more detail. Hope that review's been helpful, and I will catch you in the next one. Bye for now.
Well, you've made it to the end of the video, so thanks once again for watching. If you like what you saw, then please consider subscribing, and if you really like what you saw, then be sure to check out the link to my blog for a variety of ways in which you can help support this channel.